Hello, you're listening to the Charles Bonnet Syndrome podcast. My name is Shaimond, and today's special guest is Nancie Parker. Her career has been spent mainly nursing and working within palliative care and hospice, followed by support counseling and grief and loss. She also has CBS herself, and she's an advocate for CBS, so I'm so glad that you're here with me today. How's everything going, Nancie?
Thank you, Shaimond. Things are going well, and I'm very happy to have the opportunity of speaking with you directly, since I spend a great deal of my time listening to your podcasts, and I feel as though I know you well. It's nice to actually be on a one-to-one today.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for listening to the podcast, and you have told me that it's made a difference to you and for you. So I really appreciate that. And I'm glad that it's reaching people and it is making a difference. So thanks so much.
My pleasure, and thank you.
So can you start by telling me what your eye condition is?
Yes, at the moment, I have only light perception, which means I have a limited amount of light brightness dependent on the day and the lighting in rooms or out and about. And anything that is solid, i.e. a person, a tree, a car, anything solid is dark. So it's a dark object, but I have no definition of what it is other than a dark blob in the middle of light. And I discovered that some people, when they say, well, what exactly do you see? And can you see me? I found I had to find a better way of explaining that they are a dark blob in the middle of a circle of light. So there is some opportunity for humor during heavy days and learning days. My condition came about suddenly with an aggressive glaucoma that basically took the vision of my right eye in a couple of months. And I had all the treatments of drops and laser and then an implant in my eye to try to slow it down so that I could keep as much vision as possible. And during that time, I was told that the left eye was also showing indications of rapid decline. So I had the surgery, and it was to be 6 weeks in bed recovering. That turned out to be 4 months because of infections that I had because of an immunity issue, which was a totally separate issue. And so life changed dramatically. And then soon after that, the left eye, which had all the pressure on it to see, helped me learn how to live with no vision in the right eye. I lost the vision in the left eye. So it was, I say that 1 year was a total turnaround in my life, from being free and carefree and doing all the things that I wanted to do. And I had retired a couple of years before that, so I was doing all those fun things, improving, taking up golf and loving it and turning out to be quite the avid golfer, until I could no longer make that happen. So life changed very abruptly, and then I had to start rethinking what I could do with my life. Where could I go for help? And that took a lot, because I initially, as I've learned from many others who have gone through different eye conditions and different levels of vision loss at different speeds, I have learned that we all go through some similar things, such as life's probably over. Certainly it's over for all the aspects I know it from, but I really went through a period of despair and bordering on Great Depression, that I had no control over what had happened and what was happening. And thank goodness I had friends who were supportive, and it allowed me to realize I'm not going to just stop here. There's got to be other ways of finding out what I can do. And that took me to looking into what opportunities, what resources, what support there was in the community for me, and discovering there weren't as many as I expected there should be. But one of the consistents was the CNIB, which was the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. And it was the place for me to contact, to find out what resources they had, what kind of support they had that I may be able to make use of to learn how to live a life without clear vision.
Wow, what a story. What a story. And I like the fact that you focus on how you feel and you focus on having grief when you lose your vision, and you also reached out for some help. So this was about how long ago did you experience this vision loss?
This occurred in 2017, and so it was a year, so 2018 was when I was without the vision.
So how did you cope with that? Obviously, you had friends that cared about you, that you were able to talk to. You had the CNIB, but how did you work through that process of being able to accept it and continue to live your life and remain positive? And how did that process work for you?
I think I had my feelings changed daily initially, and I never had a clear view of where I was going or what to expect. And I never got clear answers from the medical professions. So I felt as though I was operating in a lot of unknowns. And it bothered me that there weren't answers for me, because that's the kind of person I am. I problem solve. So I look for answers. But I had a supportive family. I had a very supportive husband who cared for me over those 4 months in bed after the surgery. And then as things progressed quicker than we expected with the left eye, a lot of his life had to change because I needed a lot more support physically and emotionally. And of course, it was constant changes in how our relationship was working and how we wanted it to work in our retirement. But I had a very helpful family and a few close friends that I allowed in to my journey. I was very protective of what was going on for me and how I felt about it, which only became more that I pulled back while CBS became part of my life after a year and a half of going through losing my vision and then thinking I had it pretty well in control. I understood what was going to happen. And then this new thing occurred. And I started seeing things and I thought, good gosh, what am I doing now? What am I doing wrong? What is that? Close the door. I was seeing like what I call little fruit flies.
Okay.
And that's what I saw. And there weren't too many. And then there'd be clouds of them. And I was living for a period of time thinking, I don't know where they're coming from, only to discover it's not the season for fruit flies. There's no doors and windows open. I started asking my eye ophthalmologist, whom I was seeing often, and he basically said, oh, that's just part of your eye condition. That's just that goes along with your vision loss. I think
Wow.
that meant a lot to him, but it just left me with a lot more questions. And as the other symptoms of CBS that many people who have CBS would understand me when they hear me say this, the other things that started to occur that were called hallucinations became evident to me that there was something a whole lot more going on than just my vision loss. And I didn't want to accept that because of the word hallucinations. To me, that was a negative. Now, I've since learned over the last many years of doing research and many sessions, it is the proper term. It is a medical term, and it does relate to Charles Bonnet Syndrome. But once I started working with peer support groups, helping people through their daily trials of CBS and the different levels of where they were at with the syndrome and what they needed, I realized that we can all call it whatever it is that makes us comfortable. For me, I called it vignettes because of what was happening in my vision. It was little vignettes of storytelling. Someone else who would have scary, rulish visions would not call it a vignette. That just doesn't match. Someone else would say it was hallucinations. Someone else said, mine is like silent film. And I just get to see it every day, and I don't know which one I'm going to watch. So we all chose different ways of explaining it to ourselves and to other people. But it is considered to be a hallucination.
So Charles Bonnet, for you, started out with what you believe were fruit flies and then swarms of fruit flies. And did it actually morph into something else or change over time where you started experiencing other types of visual hallucinations?
Yes, it absolutely did. And it actually changed rather quickly from the fruit flies, because at that time I thought maybe, hopefully, these fruit flies were signs that my eyes were trying to recover and that I was getting bits of light back in. In no way was that the case. That was me trying to justify my hopes that my vision may come back. Once that was made clear that no, this is part of the process of going through Charles Bonnet Syndrome, and we all have different things that occur, I started to have, I call them octagons. They were gridded octagons that would float in my vision, in my field of vision, and that they'd float all over. So when I was looking out, I describe it as I was looking at a computer monitor, and there were these grids of different colors and multiple colors of octagons floating around. And that was a surprise to me, because once I had lost my vision, everything became black and white. And now all of a sudden I'm getting colorful octagon shapes going around. That occurred for, I think, for probably a month or more. And it came and went in the day. And as CBS progressed, those colored octagons turned into much more specific vignettes. And they were constantly with me, except when through the night. I did not have them through the night, but through the day, these vignettes were constantly there. One of the common visions that I saw was what I would call an old brick building. So it was like a brown brick with a gray mortar. And gravel on the ground, and it was like a schoolyard. So it was the side of a schoolhouse, the schoolyard, and the kids were playing on it, and it looked as though they were playing ring ball or something that was a stick and a ball. And they were children in clothing that I would put them in the 1920s. I have no idea where that came from, but that's what the vision was. And they actually became a part of my everyday for a couple of years. Although other things would come in periodically, but they became friends. It's strange to say. They weren't initially. I was very concerned about it. And I was very worried that I was losing my mental abilities to make sense of things, because I didn't know where all of this was coming from, and it didn't fit into my everyday life. It didn't fit into a TV program I was watching or listening to. It didn't fit into the story that when we read a book, we envision what we're reading.
Yes.
So I had no idea where they came from and why they stayed. And I never saw their faces. But I could tell you, again, they were in color. I could tell you the colors of their skin. I could tell you the colors of their, what I call costumes now, but it was their clothing that they wore at that time.
And it was 1920s clothing you saw.
Yes.
I hear that a lot. I hear that people see things, and it's like period pieces. They see characters or people that are from World War II or the 1800s or something, and that is interesting how they've said it. And obviously, you weren't around in the 1920s to be seeing things. So it's like, where does that come from? Is it a memory? And things like that, I hope, can be added to the research to figure out why that is. That's a consistency. One thing that I did want to mention that is interesting is a good portion of people that I speak to and that I listen to talk about their Charles Bonnet Syndrome say when they're tired, when they're relaxed, usually in the evening or at night, they start dozing off and the CBS kicks in. But it's interesting, at least from what I heard you say, is that you weren't really seeing the vignettes at night. You were seeing them through the day. So that is really interesting. I haven't really heard that. I have heard people that say from the time they wake up to the time they go to sleep, they experience CBS. But for you, the vignettes were happening during the day. Is that still the same now, or has it changed somewhat when you experience your CBS, the times of day?
No, I've realized that over time, I have accepted that this is just part of my day. This is just part of who I am. And I have different vignettes in the day, but I have them every day. I don't, thankfully, have them in the middle of the night when I get up. I don't have to tell people to get out of my way, as some of my clients have said that they have to, they say, okay, I need a little privacy here. You just stay there. Don't bother coming in to my little room. And I can chuckle about it with them because of the way they tell the story, but they have become accustomed to having that through the night. Luckily, I have not had to deal with that, because I think that would be very exhausting, that you have it all day long as well as in the night. And I can only imagine what it must be to wake up and have these people all around you in your bedroom. Like, that to me is, I feel like I've been blessed not to have to deal with that. I can deal with it during the day when I can talk to them and when I can maneuver around.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just thinking something. This is probably not a good thing, but I just talk about what I think. on this podcast because it's good to have questions.
Yes.
And I was thinking that some people experience CBS more at night, similar to what I was just saying. So what if they would have modified their sleep schedule or maybe sleep during the day and then stay up at night? Could that make a difference? I wouldn't necessarily recommend that because most people are up during the day. And if you want to interact with people and get out in your community and do things, you can't do that if you're up at night. But I was just thinking that if you try to take naps at different times, another thing that I've heard, some people say that they only experience CBS in their bedroom. So they may sleep in their living room and they can get a break from CBS. There's so many facets to it, and it seems to be as many commonalities as there are a lot of differences because CBS is different for different people. And even when it's the same person, over time, it seems to change. It morphs.
That you've said that so clearly, Shaimond. And I think as you're talking about it, I have had those experiences shared with me through groups. And it amazes me how everyone is different and it affects them differently, but there's a lot of commonality. And since we try to figure out things that we can do within our day to try and eliminate these hallucinations that occur, try to eliminate them for a short period of time because they're very exhausting. And as you can imagine, your brain and your eyes are trying to make sense of each other. And so that's just a constant, along with the everyday things of making your meal was something we all do that. Well, if you're so busy trying to figure out everything that's going on around you, it's exhausting. When we talk to people about the things they can try to do to eliminate or lessen the hallucinations, we talk about closing your eyes, opening your eyes, shifting your head back and forth, putting on music, turning off music, turning on the lights to brighten your environment. Does that make a difference? Those kinds of things do help some people, but if we took all of it we have heard over time from many people that it has helped them, and we suggest others trying it to see if it works for them, then why do we think that when we go to bed that these people that are around us all day long should disappear? Because we're going to close our eyes and they're going to disappear.
That's a good point.
It's still the same functions of the brain and the eyes taking in information, trying to make sense of it, and trying to work with each other to make sense of it. So I don't think there's much hope of making it disappear. But for some people, we don't understand why they have these visions all the time. And for others, they say, no, I'm good. When I go to bed, for instance, I sleep for several hours. And when I wake up, there's nothing. But after I've been up for a half hour, they're back.
Wow. And you're actually the first person that I've actually heard say that. I've heard people to say once they relax at night, they get it. And I've heard people say they have it all day. But I never heard anyone say that they get them during the day, but at night they don't. And to me, from my vantage point, that seems to be like a blessing because you can get some sleep. And when you have someone that has CBS constantly 24 hours, or especially at night, it's difficult to get sleep. And then if you have anxiety or sleep deprivation, it can cause other problems. So that is, I'm looking at that as a good thing, myself.
Yeah, I think so, because I do believe that we know no matter what's happening in our life outside of CBS, if we have sleep deprivation, if we have stresses occurring in our daily life, in our home life, our work life, whatever, it makes how we handle it much more difficult, much more tiring. But at least we get some rest from it. But if you have CBS and it doesn't quieten down and it's on a constant, if you can't get a break from it, to have an afternoon nap or to have a night's sleep, you're already waking up exhausted from yesterday, and now you have to deal with today. It becomes more difficult for some people than others. So much of how we deal with these issues is a lot about ourselves, our other medical issues, our ages, the other things that are happening in our life. None of it is the same from one to the other.
It's interesting that you say that, because sometimes we have medical issues and we're not even aware of it. It could be in the early stages, or maybe the body would have been able to fight it off or work through it. But when you introduce CBS and you introduce some other things with aging, not that you have to have CBS, it can be difficult, and it can start to manifest some other things that we didn't even know we had. So that is something that is probably worth looking into or studying. I'll keep that in my back pocket. I'm not a researcher. Maybe one day I'll be fortunate enough to go down that path. But that is interesting, because there are plenty of people who didn't even know they had diabetes or whatever the case may be. I don't mean to say specific diseases until they get that blood test or until they find something else, something about that. So yeah, that is. I wonder what percentage of people that have CBS potentially may have something else. And I'm not talking about something, it could just be anything, maybe cholesterol or something like that. I'm not trying to make any links. I'm not a doctor, but there could be things that we're not maybe thinking about, or that we still need to research. And I'm trying to stay away from it, but it keeps coming back to my mind. COVID, which is a big thing that gets everybody separated and all these strong opinions. But from what I heard when I listened to the doctors and the scientists talk, this is not for me, this is like the research and stuff. They were saying that one of the big problems is that people had pre-existing conditions and they weren't even really aware of that. And it caused them to have a lot of problems. I know that's a dangerous topic, so I won't stay there long, but it's just amazing how that could play a part sometime, possibly.
I think it's a good point to bring up when we're in the right place to talk about it with people that are willing and prepared to talk about it. But I can remember Judith Potts saying something some time ago in one of the sessions I listened to with her. And she said, you can have more than CBS going on. You can have two things going on at the same time. They present themselves similar but different. But you may have, the medical field may zero in on just one thing. Or you yourself, you've got it, or you're caring for a loved one that has CBS. You may just say, oh, it's probably more of that. More of the CBS and not something else. One thing that I do, probably because of my background, but I make sure that I emphasize to everyone that talks in our groups about things that are going on in their life. I say, make sure that you always, when you're talking with your medical professional, that you let them know that you have CBS. And that you let them know if there's something else that is different than it used to be. Because you may very well have something else brewing, something else going on. I'm not in a position to diagnose, and I don't recommend anybody that does CBS support groups to get involved in the medical end of things, other than to strongly recommend you talk with your medical professionals and let them know all that's going on. And to go back to your comment, Shaimond, about COVID, I think that was and is a perfect example of indicating how, for people with CBS, how lack of social contact builds anxiety and a sense of feeling alone, and then the overwhelming feeling of having to deal with all these people or these things or these ghoulish things, which we haven't really talked about, but so many different visions that occur, COVID did not allow us to be able to share that with other people, or to get out of our homes and away from where we thought the vision was. And yet when you get outside and go for your walk, there they are coming along with you.
Yes, that's so
But
important.
it pointed out to many of us how important it is not to miss out on the social aspect of life. You must continue to try to be part of that. Have it part of your life, because being alone builds more anxiety, and more anxiety brings more stress. More stress seems to aggravate CBS, and for some people it really makes it very active.
One thing that I never really thought about till now, and I'll ask you, because you said you have a little bit of light perception, but your vision is really low. So I was just wondering, if somebody has lost a significant amount of vision, or maybe they're completely blind, just that in itself is a big life change, and it's a challenge. And there are certain cues and certain things we pick up on visually that you're not able to anymore. So I was just wondering, piggybacking off what you said about isolation. So
Yes.
when you have isolation, because maybe you have an ailment or maybe you have a visual impairment, and then you had something like COVID, and then on top of that, you have your visual impairment and your isolation. I was wondering, is that a double-edged sword? Is that like worse because you already can't pick up on cues that you normally would when you didn't have the visual impairment, and then maybe you're isolated because of the visual impairment or because of the conditions that were happening in the world, or maybe you don't live, in an assisted living facility? Then I'm wondering, could that make things even worse for somebody? Because just isolation alone, even if you have no disability or no vision loss, is not good for the body. We're communal beings. We're meant to be around people, and you feel different. So if you live in a faraway place, or you don't drive, or you're not mobile, or you have a fear of getting out, I figure that can compound with your vision loss. Hopefully that was clear. I don't know if I explained it well, but I was just wondering if you think that the isolation as well, on top of the vision loss, can be like a doubly concerning for someone.
Let me say that I think you said it very well. You explained it very well. You walked us through that. I do believe personally that having that lack of social contact emphasizes the other issues of loss that you have to deal with. And I think it makes it harder to, if you don't use something, we have a saying about use it or lose it. And that can relate to also not being socially involved because of, in this case, we're talking about COVID causing that. But if you don't use your other senses because it's just you and yourself in your condo, or it's you in an assisted living environment, but it's the same people, the same process, the same day activities, you lose some of the stuff that we rely on to bring us out of our shell, to bring us aware of what's going on around us, and to make us realize that although we do not have the vision we had before, we can still be very active, involved, interactive, inclusive in our environment, and we still have a lot to learn and share.
Thank you for saying that. One thing that I want to talk a little bit about is acceptance, because you mentioned acceptance a few times. And when you have your vision loss, it's hard to accept that. And then you start having CBS, and it can be difficult to accept that. And you mentioned, everybody knows this, or most people know this, that sometimes, more often than not, you can't just will your CBS away. And when you try to fight it and you get so angry at it, sometimes that could actually backfire and cause more harm for you than if you somehow try to accept it and change the way you think about it. So Are there any tips you have for anyone about maybe how they could try to approach that or something like that possibly?
I think so much of what you've said there, so much of the answer to that from me is that it becomes a very individual thing. It's about our character, who we are, how do we deal with issues within our life and the challenges and the joys, and how do we deal with that? And then, are you dealing with it alone, or do you have someone with you? Do you have family living with you? Are you able to share some of this information? And that first stumbling block is for us as individuals to acknowledge and accept that there's something different happening here. And it's driving me crazy. It makes me feel crazy. Oh gosh, am I going crazy? And you start to question everything that you're doing. So we hesitate to tell anyone that what we're feeling, what we're seeing, what we're dealing with. Even to the point, and I say this now because of this one person that really I remember and is part of my memories of support groups and people within those groups. There's certain people that really stand out, their experience. And there was this lovely person that I would never have known was concerned about her mental well-being, that she went for 8 months without saying anything to her family, and certainly not to her friends. She dropped out of things like she sang in the church choir. She dropped out of that, and she stopped going to church, and she stopped being involved within her community and started to make herself more and more on her own without sharing the real reasons for it, where her vision loss was increasing dramatically, and she was starting to get these visions and didn't understand what they were, but thought she really was going crazy. And if she was out and about, people would notice them. And she didn't cross over that bridge of, you're the only one that sees them. Other people don't see them.
Yes.
So they don't know you're going crazy as you think, because in fact you're not. You're trying to accept and deal with it. And it was very difficult for her to admit to her family what was happening to her. And once she did that, she said it gave her more strength to spend her day talking to, in her case, she had people in her monitor all the time in her field of vision. It wasn't other things. It was people and animals, and she would talk to them. And she felt that normalized somewhat what she was seeing, and hoped that they would listen to her and disappear. It didn't work. When I asked her how did she feel about making that effort and thinking that was a good problem-solving tool, and it didn't work, how did it make her feel? And she said, I realized that I wasn't going crazy, because if I was, it wouldn't have mattered to me whether they listened to me or not. Wow. And I thought, oh my goodness, in the midst of these many stories I hear within a peer support group session, there are always moments of humor that make the group chuckle. We can pick up on those things because we are becoming accepting of what we have and how it affects us, and that it is different for each of us.
Yeah, humor is so important, and it could help us deal with so much. And they say that comedians are some of the saddest people, or have sometimes even serious issues, and they deal with it through their humor, and they make people around them laugh. And sometimes Even if I'm having a bad day or something, I may put on like a comedy thing or something because it could make things better. And it's good probably to maybe laugh at yourself sometime because some of these issues are so serious and it's debilitating and you're so frustrated that you just like sometimes you want to just make light of it in that moment.
I think we all look for that. What's the break in the day? Because so far it's been a really tough day, and what but there's a lot of people who don't have the ability to take that moment of humor. It doesn't change anything, it doesn't make anything go away, but it gives you a sense of some normality, that you can still have some humor in it.
Yes, so that's so important. Thank you for saying that. Can you talk a little bit about advocacy? And you do public speaking. You have hosted some events, even with Lucia Ricardo, who introduced me to you. And
Yes.
you, I think, just talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. I want to hear some of the things that you have done, and we'll start there. Can you talk about them?
It's all, I'll start by saying it's all good. 5 years ago, when I lost my vision and my life path changed dramatically, and people in my life, some people pulled away from our friendship groups because they didn't know how to deal with my blindness and my stumbling. Hello, I'm blind. I walk into things or I walk off the curb. I do things that are embarrassing to me, but apparently were embarrassing to my friends who didn't know how to deal with it, didn't know how to help me. And so I learned my life was going to go in a different direction. I didn't know at that time, quite honestly, that 5 years later I would look back and realize that in the past 3 years I have devoted many hours of volunteer work with CNIB nationwide. So I do peer support groups in British Columbia on the West Coast and in Ontario. I run advocacy sessions for CNIB to teach people who are losing their vision or have lost their vision when they come to us and they need to understand how do they advocate for themselves, how do they advocate outside of their home, in their communities, because they feel they've lost so much, one, control, but they've lost so much in their life and where they were going, they don't know that they have rights. They're human beings, they have rights. They have rights as a blind person to expect a barrier-free, inclusive environment and community that they can live in. They have rights if they still have a job. They have rights to ask for assistance with the companies that they work for in order to do their job. Because although they are blind, they are still bright. There's still lots to offer. And so it was a real learning for me to realize that people needed to be reminded of their value, and they needed to be reminded there are many things out there that help to advocate for yourself. But it's my role is to provide those resources and the awareness. That's what's available. And I do that through the encouragement and support of CNIB putting me in that advocacy position. And then, of course, once you start doing that, you realize that you're living advocacy all the time. Because I do not have the vision. And so I'm learning to speak up where before I would let something go. I can now speak up and say that I'm sorry, that's not okay. Or on the other hand, when I have a long white cane, and there's many people who don't see it or understand its purpose. And so you have to always educate. There are many people who walk along the street with looking at their phone and they don't see me coming. The problem with that is I don't see them either. That's why I have this long white cane to tell me if I'm going to bump into something, and that's when we meet. It's not always a great way to meet somebody.
I can believe it.
And not always taken well by the person that I walk into, but then I have to explain. So I'm advocating with the tools I use and telling other people how to advocate and tell them resources, but I'm advocating and educating at the same time. And that just becomes an everyday thing. It's more than the groups that I do.
Wow. So how can someone either reach you or find out more about what the CNIB has to offer, like programs for people with CBS? Is there a website or do you share your email, or how can people find more information?
Yeah, I do. I am one of 3 facilitators for the CBS monthly support group, and we work out of the Vancouver, or out of the British Columbia office, out of Victoria. So you can go to cnib.ca and you can look under their format for Charles Bonnet Syndrome, or you can call their 1-800 number and ask to be connected with a peer support leader who can give them information for CNIB or for CBS, or learn about any of the other supportive programs that are provided free to Canadians with vision loss in varying degrees.
Wow, that sounds great.
It's something that I knew existed, but I didn't know how much it offered until I needed it myself. And I think that's probably the case for many people. So they can certainly do that. I strongly recommend Lucia, Ricardo, and myself co-facilitated the CBS group for 3 years out of Ontario. And when she moved on in her career, it took a while for us to get something going here in British Columbia. And so it's been going for a couple of months now, about 4 months. And yet Lucia and I talk frequently because we still speak about and work for the awareness and the education and advocating for support for CBS on our own in the communities. So sometimes we get asked to go and speak at an organization. Sometimes it just comes up at a coffee shop, believe it or not.
Wow.
Someone will hear the discussion and go, "Excuse me, didn't mean to overhear this, but what is it you're talking about?" And then before you know it, the circle of coffee drinkers just gets a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And it makes me realize how important it is and how many people out there actually are touched by CBS. And when you hear the numbers that it's at least 1 in 3 people who have developed CBS, it's always associated with sight loss in varying levels, varying degrees of sight loss, but it's always associated with that. There is no smell, no sound involved. It is visual. And it's most often as we get older that we develop CBS, because we most often develop sight loss in varying degrees as we get older.
So true.
So it all makes sense, but it tells us that if we know there are X amount of people in a city or in a country, and you know that the numbers from research with Professor Dominic Fitch in the UK, who is the leader worldwide, in my opinion, on the work he's done in years for CBS, if it's 1 in 3 people, doesn't matter where you put yourself in the world, 1 in 3 people is a lot of people that need awareness, need help, need support. And then you add on to that the people who are their caregivers, their friends, their co-workers. It affects so very many people. It just seems a shame that we don't have more knowledge, more support, and more financing to do research to do a better job at helping so many people.
I agree. And your awareness, the awareness that you're bringing about the condition is definitely going to help. And sometimes it starts, like you say, at a coffee shop, sometimes a one-on-one conversation. And many times when people talk about CBS, people will say, oh, that sounds like something my aunt was experiencing. Or they may say themselves, they were experiencing it, but they never talked to anyone about it.
Yes.
So just talking about it and bringing awareness can definitely help. It definitely does. Yeah. So I appreciate everything you've done. Thank you for being an advocate. Thank you for pressing on and still helping people, although you still you have CBS yourself. And that's so important because sometimes giving back and volunteering can help you because you maybe get outside of your own head or you focus on someone else and somehow it comes back to you and it benefits you by working alongside other people and giving back. So I appreciate all that you're doing and you're making a big difference. And not only in Canada and other places too, because the things that you and Lucia Ricardo have done, I'm sure people
Yes.
from the U.S. join those support groups at times. And I know you
Yes.
guys had a big conference that you helped put together with Lucia maybe a year or so ago. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. I appreciate
Yes,
that.
Lucia worked very hard on that. And I want to say that I'm very happy that Eva Potts in the U.S. and Dr. Gary Cusick in the U.S. have worked hard at having their groups going. Because when you go outside of that, you go to basically the UK where there's 3 excellent groups going and there's research being done in several of the universities in the UK and in New Zealand. And the more you get into it, the more you realize there are pockets of this information being worked upon. And we're getting there. A lot is needed and it's slow work, but we're getting there. But we did not have any of that here in Canada until Lucia Ricardo worked on the knowledge that she was receiving and the desire of people needing information. She really worked on getting CNIB at that time to support it as one of their groups. Since then, it's been fun learning more information, talking with more researchers and more people who run support programs in different countries to see how it all goes. And that feeds me to want to do more and more and always looking at, so in what other ways can we do it? Because it's obvious that there is still lots needed. And I will always be thankful to Lucia for bringing me on helping me initially on my own journey, but then bringing me on as a facilitator with her so that I learned so much. And I'm now able to move on and do that. And the peer groups that I do, Shaimond, I am so grateful for because people have the courage to share their stories. And I come away feeling as though I have been able to help them in some ways, and they have given me so much information to pass on to the next group. And that's what keeps us going. So I'm very happy about that. And I feel very lucky to be part of this. I'm certainly hoping that I've touched upon some important aspects for other people to hear this and understand what's happening to their loved ones or themselves more. And I thank you very much for all that you do to continue this support group with your podcasts and with your newsletter, and for reaching out to other groups and bringing in speakers and making the information more available to all of us to learn more and be better at what we do and better at living with CBS.
So if someone was struggling with CBS and they're having a really difficult time, what would you say to them?
Well, that's a really good question. I would probably ask them, how are you feeling right now, talking with me? And that gives me a sense of how they feel about what they're dealing with. And then, have you told others, your family, your partner? Have you spoken about this to others? Have you talked to a medical professional, your eye doctor, your optometrist, ophthalmologist, ophthalmic surgeon, neuro-ophthalmologist? And that's a way of gathering some information from them so I know how far to step into it and not to put pressure on them. But it's also, if they haven't done some of those things, it's a gentle way of suggesting it so that I'm not adding more burden to them. Well, you should have done this or that.
I like that. Yeah, that's so important because you can't do it alone. And as far as speaking to your ophthalmologist or some kind of a doctor, I personally believe that the doctor, you should be able to say anything to your doctor because they are where it is medically, mentally, whatever, emotionally, it just because, so that's so important. And hopefully people can be able to speak to the doctors about what's going on. And hopefully more doctors find out about CBS and can help try to address it. And I spoke to a doctor that, interestingly enough, said that sometimes, doctors are in the business of solving problems and healing people. And when you can't, it's challenging, and the doctor may not know necessarily, I'm paraphrasing here, but the doctor may not know how to approach something or how to respond, but you can give resources. You can give a pamphlet. You can lead them to a podcast or to an organization and a support group or just something along those lines to just help them. And every little bit can make a difference.
Absolutely. And I, like you, have found that many eye physicians do not know about CBS or do not want to put the time towards it because there's nothing they can do to fix it. And not understanding that just giving the time to the patient to explain what they're going through and saying that's normal, and that's fixing it the best you can fix it. It's better than setting it aside like it's not an issue. And I'm on this quest of every time I go to one of my medical professionals, I'm talking to them about CBS. Do you have any information on it that you give out to your patients? Do you have a page of resources so that you can hand to the patient and family members that they can take away and follow up with? Things that can be done so that it's not taking the precious time of the doctors who are already overworked, but it's giving the information to the patient and family so that they can gather more information and maybe come to a more comforting, controlling position that they need to be in. And I want to say that I dealt with 3 different eye surgeons during my process of surgeries and trying to save the sight. And all 3 of them did not. 2 of the 3 knew about CBS but didn't want to talk about it. Right now we're just focusing on this issue, which was trying to slow down my vision loss. And it was actually my neurologist, when I asked him if he knows, because eye and brain going together, what the eye sees, what the brain sees, nerve endings, all of that fitting together as well as I could figure it out. I thought he was a good one to ask. And he said, I don't get asked about it much. And he said, I think I have. And he got up from his desk, went over to his bookshelf, and he pulled out this humongously thick medical book.
Wow.
And then another one. And he put them down on the desk, and he opened it up and he was looking through it. And I could tell by the sound that the pages were like, I'm going to show how old I am, were like onion paper. They were the thin pages of old Bibles.
Wow.
Used to be like, or old, if you get first edition books and so on. They have those thin pages. And he was going through all of that. And he said, oh, here it is here. It was 2/3 of a chapter on Charles Bonnet Syndrome in this book that I'm going to guess was a couple thousand pages. And then he reached for a smaller book and he said, I don't know if this would have it in it. But he took the time to look and answer, give me some information, give me some resources. And he was a neurologist. He wasn't dealing with my eye vision issues.
That is so good. I love hearing stories when doctors or other medical professionals go above and beyond. They take a little bit of extra time and they try to help in those types of ways, because I'm sure he had a lot of patients and he had other things he could have done, and he's not even an ophthalmologist, and he was able to do that. So that's really good. I was going to ask you this earlier and then I didn't. Then I was saying, am I going to ask or not? I usually ask this question. So you started experiencing the CBS symptoms, and like most people, you probably didn't know what was going on. How did you actually get to the point where you knew it was CBS? Did a doctor tell you, or did you research online? How did you even find out about CBS and tie that to what it is that you were experiencing?
It was a combination of things. Within the first year of me, I lost the vision completely in my right eye aggressively. The left eye took over 7 months and some surgeries. In that time period, I could still read enough that I could go online and I was looking up symptoms and I was problem solving. I didn't even know to look for Charles Bonnet Syndrome. And it was when I came across an article that came out of the UK and it talked about Charles Bonnet Syndrome. And I went, I don't know what that is. And I looked into it and started to read the article. And it was there, clear as could be. All the symptoms that I was experiencing was written there in this article. And plus the history of Charles Bonnet discovering that his grandfather was going through this in the 1760s. And I'm like, that can't be right. Read it, 1760s, and they started to know things about that to the point that it became apparent they were going to call this syndrome Charles Bonnet Syndrome because he was the first to talk about it and talk about his grandfather's experiences. We haven't come very far in the research when you think of it that way. But it was me gathering that information enough to then be able to say and be effective in my timing and my questions when I went to see the eye surgeon to ask him, do you know about Charles Bonnet Syndrome? And yes, he did. And I said, do you have information that you can give to me? And he said, not right here. Why do you want it? And I said, because I believe that the things I'm experiencing are Charles Bonnet Syndrome. And he said, well, they probably are. And I can remember that so clearly. It was the tone of his voice of, well, yeah. And I said, but I don't remember you ever telling me about this, that it may happen. And he said, it happens to most people and it happens at different times. And it was a very non-committal, non-committed comment. And I said, I could have lessened my anxiety so much more and so much quicker had I been made aware that this is something that some people have. And if you have it, come back and talk to me. Don't worry about it.
That is so true. That's what I say. Eva Potts says, Judith Potts, and
Yeah,
so many
good.
people. If we could just have pamphlets or have it somehow a part of the check-in process when you when you go blind, or when you have a severe visual impairment, or when you're getting a major eye surgery, just say this is something that's out there that happens to some people, not everybody. And if you experience this or some variation of that, know that this is a possibility. Bring it to my attention or another doctor's attention.
Right.
So that
Yeah.
could definitely.
It's why I say advocating and awareness are so high on my list of towards this syndrome, is because I've heard the stories in the last 3 years of what people have gone through, and it saddens me to think that it could have been less stressful for them, less painful for them, had they known that this was something that they should be aware of. And it very well may not happen, but if it did, it would probably upset you. And I'd like you to know that this may happen. And if it does, come and talk to me, or go and talk to your general practitioner about it. Get the information, get the help.
I'm hoping that happens. It's already starting to happen. I was on a support group with Eva Potts today, and she said that she was going to get pamphlets into a local doctor's office by her, and that's in North Carolina, I believe.
Yeah.
So hopefully that does happen, and then we could branch out. It costs money to print pamphlets and to do different types of things, but it's definitely necessary that we get the right mix of the right type of pamphlet and the right type of way to distribute it, or something that could be manageable. So
absolutely. Yeah. And Deborah Potts is determined. So I think she'll be knocking on every door in her city saying, here you go, doctor.
So what if someone wanted you to speak at an event or something? Is it a way they can reach out to you? Do you only speak in Canada? Do you come in person, only virtual? Or what is that like? Because you do different things for the visually impaired and for CBS.
I would gladly speak at groups. I do speak at groups for other issues regarding vision loss and advocacy. This past week, I was a guest speaker at an event and did not talk about Charles Bonnet Syndrome because that was not what the event was about, but had 2 people come up at the end of it to ask me a couple of questions. And the one gentleman said, have you ever heard of people having these hallucinations? And I said, I have. And some people have been told they have Charles Bonnet Syndrome. Is that what you might be speaking of? And he said, yes, I'm so glad that you know about that. And I thought, oh, just to hear the relief in his voice that he found it okay to speak out about it made me make a note to myself at the end of that day that I needed to reach back out to that organization to say, perhaps I could come and talk about Charles Bonnet Syndrome sometime.
Wow, that is probably your approach, and the fact that you were open and greeting and taking questions, and he felt comfortable going to say, and that's brave of him to say, have you ever heard of it? Because he didn't know what you would say, and then the way that you responded was definitely positive. So that is really good. So it seems we all want everybody to know about Charles Bonnet Syndrome, and we want to go big places and get big articles and billboards, but sometimes it's one person at a time, and it's just like a grassroots efforts until the momentum builds up, because to really reach a lot of people, you may have to go outside of that one person at a time, but that's where it starts.
That's how it starts. And when you speak to one person, they speak to one person, and it adds on and it multiplies. And I think that's one of the great benefits of COVID, is that we had to go inward. But many of us learned a lot more about tech. Many of us learned about Zoom. And we end up getting together more frequently and in greater numbers and more. Here in Canada, we have provinces, you have different states. We would get people across the country coming together for a monthly virtual meeting. So you get more people involved, aware, supported. I find that the virtual meetings are very helpful for some people that cannot get out. And if you have a hybrid meeting where you might meet in person, but you also have it available online, it just makes more available information and support for more people out there.
I totally agree. It's really good, the technology we have and the things that are available to us. And I think it's going to get better one day at a time. And it's definitely, we're headed in the right direction.
And Shaimond, because I do not have a foundation or anything that I can go back to and say, contact my foundation and you'll contact me. You do have my information. If you have anyone that does say they would like more information, they'd to talk with me, then please, you and I connect so I can help that person or that group.
I can certainly do that. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for speaking with me today. It was very insightful and inspiring, and all of the things you're doing. Each story that I hear is something that is really good and beneficial, because it's, like I say, as many commonalities as there are some differences and some nuances, and everybody's journey is different. And having more people like yourself that actually are people that are actually facilitating groups and leading a lot of things, that's so important too. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Shaimond. I really very much appreciate you reaching out and allowing me to be part of today's podcast and allowing me to share my knowledge and hear more stories that I learned from and share with the groups as we go along. And thank you for all that you do. It's so much more than what people realize it takes away from your family and your time to help all of us. But I do very much appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that too. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the show, subscribe and rate the podcast. It makes a difference. And if you would like to contact me, you can email me at info@cbsyndromepodcast.com.